Modern Stoic analytics is born where the event feed resembles an endless stream of logs, and a person attempts to find meaning within the flow of signals. Technological chaos is not chaos in the mathematical sense. It is rather like an overloaded server processing too many requests without an optimized queue. Stoics observed a similar dynamic in the human psyche long before the emergence of data centers. They called these passions, impulses, affects. Today we speak of cognitive load, information noise, behavioral triggers. I begin by clearing my mind. I perceive the mind as a living system that requires regular updates and checks for logical glitches. I track my own reactions as carefully as an engineer monitors code performance after deployment. Every thought undergoes internal validation. I ask myself about the source of the impulse, its real value, its long-term effect. I allow information to enter only when it strengthens the structure rather than blurring it. In this process, I feel a clarity born of discipline. I do not run from complexity, I organize it. Mentis Code philosophy for me is a daily synchronization with my own core, where thought becomes precise and action consistent. Stoic analytics works like an internal debugger. It separates events into those within the zone of influence and those lying outside of it. In the language of modern systems, this resembles the distinction between controlled parameters and external variables. When a software architect defines module boundaries, they establish an API. A Stoic forms their own API for interacting with reality. Requests from the outside pass through a filter of rational evaluation instead of an impulsive reaction. In Seneca's works, the idea of internal autonomy resonates. He wrote about freedom as a state of mind independent of circumstances. For a modern engineer, this resembles containerization. The process is isolated, resources are controlled, the environment is defined. External failures do not destroy the kernel. Similar logic was developed by Epictetus, who taught the discipline of judgments. He effectively described a mental event processing pipeline where the first stage is perception, the second is interpretation, and the third is decision. Stoic practice is akin to optimizing this pipeline, reducing latency between an event and a weighed response. The technological era amplifies affects through algorithmic attention tweaking. Social networks operate on the principle of a dopamine feedback loop. Every notification becomes a micro-signal of significance. Stoic analytics proposes reconfiguring internal feedback. Instead of external validation, an internal criterion for the quality of action is formed. In machine learning terms, this is a transition from external labeling to self-learning with regularization. A person introduces constraints that prevent overfitting on random events.
Marcus Aurelius left notes resembling a private repository of reflections. His daily entries can be read as the log files of an emperor managing an empire and simultaneously his own thinking. He records errors, analyzes reactions, reviews priorities. Such practice is close to the concept of iterative development, constant refactoring of character instead of a one-time heroic effort. Ancient wisdom reveals a pattern confirmed by modern cognitive science. Emotion arises after the evaluation of an event. Evaluation is the result of an internal model of reality. If the model is distorted, the reaction becomes chaotic. In a technological environment, this resembles a system with incorrect input data. Garbage in produces a distorted output. Stoicism works at the model level. It corrects basic assumptions about control, loss, success, and failure. The modern individual often lives in a permanent push notification mode. Attention is scattered, focus is fragmented.
Stoic analytics offers a different rhythm, similar to asynchronous task processing. A response is formed after an internal timeout when the mind checks priorities. Such a pause increases the throughput of thinking. Paradoxically, slowing down yields a gain in efficiency. The scientific approach here manifests in observation and verification. Stoics practiced a daily audit of actions. This resembles A/B testing of behavior. A person tries a different reaction, analyzes the consequences, updates the strategy. Continuous improvement occurs, similar to DevOps culture, where development and operations are merged into a single cycle. Technological chaos appears fragmentary only on the surface. Beneath it lie stable patterns linked to human nature. The drive for recognition, fear of loss, desire for control. Ancient thought shows that these patterns repeat over centuries. The interface changes, the kernel remains. Stoic analytics teaches one to work with the kernel, not the interface.
Positivity in this approach is born from the realization of limits and possibilities. When a person accepts the fact of event variability, they focus on the quality of their own action. Such a position creates internal stability that can be called mental resilience. It is formed like a well-tuned system that withstands peak loads without loss of functionality. Modern Stoic analytics combines ancient mental discipline with engineering precision. It does not promise quick fixes. Instead, it offers an architecture of thought. Within this architecture, a person becomes the developer of their own character, the tester of their own beliefs, and the administrator of internal resources. Technologies accelerate the pace, while Stoic wisdom adds depth. Together, they create a space where clarity overcomes noise and responsibility forms true freedom. When the architecture of thinking is built consciously, a sense of internal bandwidth emerges.
A person no longer drowns in streams of news, trends, releases, and crises. They work with them as a data array requiring classification. Stoic analytics forms its own event indexing scheme. An event receives a significance tag, impact level, time horizon. Some things automatically enter the archive of short-term noise. Others move into the strategic decisions section. In this approach, the concept of an internal responsibility protocol becomes vital. In programming, a protocol defines the rules of interaction between components. In human character, the protocol becomes a set of principles that set the format of reaction. When a system has a clear protocol, it does not waste resources on chaotic negotiations. Similarly, someone who has formed their own code conserves cognitive energy. Stoics spoke of virtue as the central axis. In modern lexicon, this can be called integral consistency. It is similar to data consistency in a distributed database. If one node lives by different rules, a version conflict arises. Internal conflict operates by the same logic. A person declares certain values but acts otherwise. Stoic analytics offers synchronization between belief and deed. Such synchronization reduces internal entropy. Technological culture often feeds the illusion of total control. Dashboards, metrics, and real-time analytics create a sense of complete manageability. However, complex systems behave non-linearly. A small trigger can launch an avalanche of consequences. Ancient thought recognized this non-linearity from a different angle. It spoke of accepting events lying beyond human will. Modern science confirms that an excessive need for control increases stress levels and lowers adaptability. Stoic practice helps rebuild expectations. It works with forecasting but without fixation on a specific scenario. In probability theory terms, this is flexible management of the distribution of outcomes.
A person prepares for various event trajectories while maintaining a stable behavioral core. Such a strategy increases anti-fragility, to use the language of complex systems. In a professional environment, this manifests as the ability to endure deadlines, conflicts, and technical debt without losing clarity. Stoic analytics reminds us that the reaction to a bug in the code weighs no less than the bug itself. Instead of panic, an algorithm of action is formed. Diagnosis, prioritization, fix, verification. The same applies to life difficulties. An event becomes a task. A task is decomposed into steps. At the same time, Stoicism does not reduce a human to a cold machine. It recognizes emotions as signals. A signal contains information but does not dictate behavior. Modern neuroscience shows that awareness of an emotion activates brain regions responsible for regulation. Stoic analytics integrates this knowledge into practice.
When the internal system stabilizes, the very perception of time changes. Most people experience time as a flow of deadlines and messages overlapping one another. Stoic analytics offers a different optics. Time becomes a space for the sequential processing of experience. It resembles a task queue in a well-tuned process scheduler. Each action receives its own slot of attention, while redundant requests are filtered out. In a technical environment, there is the concept of signal noise. Data only makes sense when the signal exceeds the background noise. A similar principle operates within the psyche. Emotions, news, and the evaluations of others create a dense acoustic layer of information. Stoic discipline forms the ability to isolate the pure signal. A person gradually learns to feel the difference between what affects their life and what merely simulates significance. In this process, the phenomenon of an internal thought compiler emerges. Every idea undergoes a check for consistency with principles, experience, and the long-term logic of life. In programming, a compiler translates abstract code into an executable structure. A similar transformation occurs in human thinking. Intuition and values are converted into concrete action. Ancient Stoics understood well that humans rarely think in a stable state. The mind vacillates between fear and hope. Modern psychology describes this as the dynamics of neurochemical cycles. Stoic analytics offers stabilization through the practice of observation. When a person fixes their state, the emotional wave loses momentum, much like a monitoring system that detects anomalies before they become an accident. Another important property of thinking emerges, which can be called cognitive scalability. In complex systems, scalability means the ability to work under increased load without losing performance. The human psyche also has load limits. I end each day with an internal audit. I review decisions, analyze emotional spikes, and correct behavioral algorithms. I accept turbulence as part of a large system in which my consciousness is responsible for the stability of its own circuit. I cultivate clarity through practice and resilience through repeated attention. My Mentis Code is a constant movement toward deeper alignment between intention and deed. I build thinking as an architecture capable of withstanding the pressures of time, and in this architecture, I find the peace that feeds development. Modern Stoic analytics forms a culture of depth. It combines ancient discipline with engineering thinking, scientific attentiveness with human warmth. In such a configuration, technologies become an extension of the mind, while the mind retains clarity despite complexity. It is here that a new type of maturity emerges, where strength lies in the ability to think systemically, act responsibly, and remain internally whole.